Alright, hello and welcome back to the Video Game O.R, the series where we show you the process in repairing and restoring all things gaming. Today we'll be taking this NES extension cable and Arduino Nano and making a controller debugger. Alternatively, you could also use it as a stream overlay, but for the purposes of this video, we'll be focusing on controller debugging. And in this circumstance, we'll be doing it for the original Nintendo Entertainment System. However, this also works for Super Nintendo, Gamecube, N64, really anything you can plug an extension cable into. But without any further ado, let's get on to the procedure. Okay, so the first order of business to get started with this is to turn our attention to this extension cable. I'll have a link to this one in the description down below in case you want to match 100%. We're gonna need to start by dissecting this cable. Specifically, we want to get access to the clock, the latch, and the data pins so that we can send those off to the Arduino and then use the program to take the controller inputs and display them on screen for us. So I think the easiest way to do this would be if we cut it on this side where the female connector is, because then we could have this close to this whole setup close to where the end of the controller is to the PC, and then the extra 5 feet of cable can go to the NES. So we'll probably snip it right about here. We'll just get a little cut action going. Oh, nice. And they do look like they're color coded, but we'll have to check the continuity. All right, so now that we've snipped the cables, it does look like the cords are color coded. I don't think they're the right colors to what Nintendo used back in the day, so we'll have to peel back the skirt and then take some continuity checks with the pins here to figure out which one are the pins that we're looking for, and then we'll solder some extra headers onto that that'll go to our Arduino, and then basically we'll just patch the whole thing up, and then we should be good to go. Overall, it shouldn't be too difficult of a process, but we will see, because, you know, optimism can sometimes get beat out by complication. But so I'll just take a little razor here and try to remove some of this tubing off of our cables. Yeah, that seemed to have done a pretty good job, actually. Now, I will be honest, where this is my first attempt at doing this, so we'll just kind of see how it goes. If it works, hoorah. If it doesn't work, well, then you probably won't see this video. Okay, so it looks like we only have 5 pins, so that's interesting, seeing as this is a 7-pin connector. So basically, we're going to need these 3 pins right here, because those are our latch. So pulse, or the clock, is going to be the second one down from the top. Your latch pin is the one in the middle, and your data is the bottom one. So let's just strip some of these cables back, get the ends tinned up, and then we'll grab the multimeter and check to verify that we got all the pins that we need for this. Alright, with our wires all stripped, we're just going to twist the ends up so that we can apply solder and avoid the tips of these wires fraying. Now, I can tell you right off the bat that I'm pretty sure these black and these red ones are going to be our power and our ground, because that is a universal color combination. But, you know, with these cheap, let's just say cheap cables, it really could be anything. Because cheapness does not always mean that it's going to be to standard. So, pro tip, if you're trying to solder or like do wires solo, if you take the solder and you just bend it up a little bit, you can get some on your soldering iron and then apply it to the leads pretty easily. Okay, so we'll put that to the side for right now, and we will grab our multimeter and put it onto continuity. If you don't know what continuity is, it should be the one that does a little sound icon. Basically, what this is going to do is whenever we get a completed circuit, it will buzz. So, if we take one of our probes and insert it into the clock port, and then head to the other side of this and touch. Okay, red's not clock, yellow's not clock. Oh, is that for realsies? Is green our clock? Oh, there we go. All right, so yep. Green is our pulse, or our clock. So let's just write that down on the whiteboard. Now we're gonna need to know which one of these wires is what, so that when we go to wire it up to the Arduino, everything is correct, so that everything, you know, functions. So we'll shove our new connector into the middle pin, and then we'll start probing these wires. Is it yellow? Yep, seems like it. Okay, so yellow is going to be our latch. So we'll add that to the thing, and I seem to misplace my marker. I found it. Okay, so yellow is latch. And then our last one, which would be our data pin, is probably going to be white, but we will still check it nonetheless, just to be sure. So again, we got it in the bottommost port on the 4-pin side, and we'll just touch this to white. Oh, nothing on white. Black. Interesting. Okay, so black is our data pin. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Okay, so black. Add that to the whiteboard too. Is data. Now that we check for continuity, we can put away the ye old multimeter and get on to soldering our additional wires on, and then rejoining these two in holy matrimony. So I think the first order of business should probably be to trim the other side of this to our male connector and fry the wires as such so that we can get a nice clean thing. And what we're going to do is we'll take a little additional jumper, attach it to each of the 3 points that we just labeled off there. We'll have that run out to the side probably this way, so we'll probably attach it on this side, and then we'll solder these two together, throw a piece of heat shrink over top of it, and then that should be good. So I will start cutting this side away, and then we will just go from there. So ultimately the point of this is, so say you want to test a controller and verify that all the buttons are working properly, you can use, you know, this little device that we're going to be building here. Alternatively, if you are into streaming or you know, making videos on original hardware, you can use this little device to have a controller input overlay. So it serves a dual purpose, either if you're in the mood for console repair work and troubleshooting, or if you are into video production, which, you know, is pretty neat. So if you're using like an original NES controller and you're just retrofitting it to kind of do this, or if you're attaching it straight to the controller PCB itself, which you could, the colors you want are red for the clock, orange for the latch, and yellow for the data. We don't have an orange, so let's see. We could probably we'll just do green for our clock. We'll get yellow going for our data, and then we will get black. Well, black for our data and yellow for our latch. Basically, we'll follow the same color scheme that they have going on inside of this controller extension cable, and we'll just extend it onto the outside just to keep things simple, and then, you know, we don't get confused with color combinations later on. So we'll just measure green to length, snip it, and then measure black. I am out of black. Okay, so our black is going to become blue. With our wires cut to length, we're just going to bring in our, you know, wire strippers. We'll strip both ends of the wire because might as well just do them now instead of waiting and doing them later, as one end is going to need to go into our Arduino Nano. Now, if you wanted to make this like a modular thing so that you could use it for different controllers, because with this, you kind of make it for a controller, and then it kind of stays for that controller, because, like, for instance, the NES and Super Nintendo need these 3 different pins, but if you're trying to do it with, say, Gamecube controller, the Gamecube controller only needs the data pin. And so you could end up getting, like, female to male adapters, kind of like these. Well, actually, these are female to female, but, you know, you could get a plug like this, and then if you solder this to the Arduino, you can just plug a new cable in and make it modular. Of course, you'll have to update the Arduino sketch, but it saves you from needing to buy like 6 different Arduinos for these. So, with our wires stripped, we're going to just add a little bit of solder to the ends of these, tin them up, mainly so that they don't fray. This blue one, well, this blue and green one look to have pretty long leads on the end, so we'll probably end up reducing that a little bit before we get to the final circuit here. Okay, so we'll just want to straighten out our wire here, and then we will grab our other end. So this is the female side, this one's the male side. We'll grab a little piece of heat shrink tubing, and what we're going to do first is we will join these 2 yellow ends together, and then we'll probably, we'll chuck a little piece of heat shrink tubing over top of this just to hold the 2 together. And this is a good technique if you're trying to solder 2 wires together and you don't have the aid of a helping hand. So we will push these 2 together, run this little piece of heat shrink tubing over top. That will hold these 2 in place while we get the solder together, or while we get the solder on them. And then once we bring it over to this other yellow one, we'll slide the heat shrink tubing over, and then we can heat it up and join them together permanently. So first we'll bring in our little bit of solder, and then we'll just try to straighten these out the best we can. Now what I'm going to do first, before we get too far into this, is so that when we're completely done here, instead of having like all these wires hanging out, I'm gonna grab an extra large piece of heat shrink tubing. I think probably this one would be good. And we're just going to run part of this. We'll just run part of this over our female end. Now you could do this over the other end if you wanted to. And then that way, when we're completely done, we can slide this over the entire circuit and then heat shrink tube it. So now that we got that together, we can join these 2 yellow ones together. Get our solder up. Oh, actually, yep. So we'll grab this yellow one. Come on, stop being a pain. There we go, nice and straight. Okay, let's look at that. Yeah, that's a pretty good join there. All right, so we'll slide our piece of heat shrink tubing right over top of these. So that's a problem that you'll run into occasionally when you are soldering components this close together, is just because the soldering iron is in close proximity to it, sometimes it will actually start activating your heat shrink tubing before you want it to. Alright, so we now have our 3 signal wires coming off of our controller adapter. We'll just do a quick double check that everything is correct. So yellow goes to latch, green goes to clock, and our 2 greens are linked together, and then black goes to data. And we do have a blue going off of there because we do not have any extra black wires. So now all that's left to do is to grab our red and our white, which should be our data, or our 5-volt and ground, and we will just throw a little bit of heat shrink tubing on top of that, and then just solder these 2 together. Alright, so now we have all of our wires and our signal wires coming off. So what we'll do is we'll take that big piece of heat shrink tubing that we put on there earlier and slide that across all of our wires. Might get a little tight where all the connections are. Alright, that looks pretty good. Because we actually cut our heat shrink a little short, we could have probably used the entirety of it. Or to pull out some electrical tape. There we go. And we'll just wrap our cable situation up just to make sure that it's completely isolated, nothing it can short on, and to make sure that we, as the end user, don't get an electric shock by touching any point on this cable. Okay, so now that we have our controller extension cable all set up with our female connector, our little soldering job, our 3 signal wires, all leading to the the male end of the connector, the next thing to do is to take our Arduino Nano and load the program on it for Nintendo Spy, and that is what we'll be using to read our controller inputs. And then we'll come back here and we will solder the signal pins onto the Nano, and it should be all good to go. So let's head over to the computer and get the program loaded up on here. Alright, so once you're on your computer, the first thing you're going to want to do is head on over to the Arduino website and download a copy of the Arduino IDE. You can download them from right here. I won't be doing so in this video because I already have it on my computer, but if you don't already have it, you can download it here. I'll have a link in the description for this website. And the other piece of software we'll need is Nintendo Spy, so I'll have a link to the GitHub page down in the description, and once you're on here, you're going to want to scroll down to where it says download the latest Nintendo Spy release here. We'll click on that, and then we're going to want to download this Nintendo Spy release zip file here. And once that's downloaded, we're going to want to go and grab our archive. We'll make a new folder and we'll just call it NSpy, because that's basically what it is. And we'll drag our archive into our new folder. Then we're going to want to open that up, click on our archive, extract the contents on the inside, and then delete the zip because we don't need that. So in here, you're going to have the key bindings XML. That'll be for your key binds in case you're using, a different third-party controller. You have the main executable for the file. You have the skins for your controller, but what we're interested in right now is the firmware. So we're going to want to launch the firmware.ino, and once that is loaded, we're going to want to connect our Arduino to our computer using a USB cable, either one that was provided with your Arduino, or if you have an Nano, it's a USB type B. Once it's connected, we will just ignore this. But once it's connected, you're going to want to select your board so you can come up here, and we're going to choose COM4. Well, I will use COM4 because that is what it is connected to. However, if you're not sure which serial port your Arduino is connected to, basically plug it in, click on select board, see what's listed, and then unplug it and see which one disappears, and that's basically your COM port. Now, because we're using a Nano, we're going to want to scroll down and find Arduino Nano in here. Right there, and click OK. Alternatively, if you don't want to use this, you can go up to Tools and then select the board and the COM port from here as well. Now, this is basically the sketch for our firmware, and what we're going to want to do is uncomment one of these, depending on what controller you're going to want to connect to your Nintendo Spy device. In this circumstance, it's the NES, so we're going to highlight the double backslashes and delete that. And this is now turned on NES mode. So then all that's left to do is click this little upload button, and that will compile the sketch and upload it to our chip. And as soon as it says done uploading, you're all good to go, and we can exit out of the Arduino IDE. Then all that's left is to go back over to our workbench and solder the signal wires coming from our little controller dangle doodad to the appropriate points on the Arduino chip. Okay, so with our program loaded up onto our Arduino Nano, what we're going to want to do is solder on our signal wires. Now, for the NES and the Super Nintendo, we're going to be using digital pins 6, 4, and 3. If you're doing an N64, you'll want it to be on pin 2. That'll be for your signal wire, and if it is a Gamecube, you're going to attach it to digital 5. So let's go ahead and get our soldering out, or our soldering iron out, I should say, and pre-tin points 6, 4, and 3 on our Arduino. Okay, so our clock pin is going to go on Arduino 6, and with our wiring job that we did earlier, our clock should be our green wire. Now, when you're doing this part, if you attach something to the wrong pin, most likely it won't do anything wrong here, because the Arduino is just reading the signals that are coming off of these wires. However, if you wired something incorrectly inside of here, then you do run a risk of causing damage to your system if you cross some of these pins, or the controller just won't work. Alright, so now we'll attach our data pin, which our data pin on our wire was blue, and that is going to go into digital pin 4 on our Arduino. And last but not least, we're going to have our latch pin, which in our circumstance is yellow. So we will cut the lead a little shorter because we don't need it that long. Once again, grab our soldering iron, put a little bit of solder on the end, and attach it to D3. Now, if this is too hard for you, or you have difficulty attaching this freehand, you can always use tweezers to run the wires into these vias. So, that pretty much is it in terms of our whole setup. Now, if you have a 3D printer, you could probably 3D print a nano box. Alternatively, you could wrap this cord in some electrical tape just to insulate it. I do have a 3D printer, however, I do not have a case. So what we're going to do is we're just going to wrap it with a little bit of electrical tape just to insulate it while we run our tests, and then maybe later down the road, I'll either print a case or design a case and go from there. Now, if you're using a nano, you want to be careful not to tape this switch down, because that is the reset switch, and if you tape that switch down, your nano will not boot because it's just going to be constantly resetting itself. So definitely be careful when adding tape. And we will want the USB port accessible, because that is how we will connect it to our computer to read the data outputs. So now that we have this all wired up, we can take it over to the Nintendo and give it a test to see if everything works. So I already have the controller plugged in and the NES is on. So what we'll do is we will attach the Arduino to the computer, and then we will launch the Nintendo Spy application. And let's see, so controller source is NES, COM port is COM4, correct. We'll click go. And let's see, oh yep, that is definitely reading the button inputs, so that's good. Well, it looks like we successfully made a controller debugger using an Arduino and Nintendo Spy. So with that, if you enjoyed, remember to leave a like and subscribe so that you don't miss anything new from the Video Game O.R. Also, feel free to leave a comment on what you'd want to see covered for a chance for it to be featured in the next episode. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one.